Hello. So I'm Anna, and I've been told to talk to you for 20 minutes about my career and to give you some advice. And then I'm going to take some highly intelligent questions, which I doubt that I'll be able to answer. So I want to start by saying what an honor it is to be here for me today. It's the second time that I've talked to the union. It's a real thrill for me because I come from a highly academic family. I had a brother and a cousin at Oxford, a sister at Cambridge, a grandfather who taught law at Harvard. Both my parents went to Cambridge. So obviously deeply intimidated, I left school at 16 and went straight to work. It's a path I sometimes regret, especially seeing my own children make friends for life at university and seeing how incredibly important that time was to them for figuring things out. So as I was coming here yesterday from Italy, I was thinking, what can I possibly say to you that will have relevance? Because I feel that everything that I said a few years ago is probably hopelessly out of date. So I'm going to start by saying something rather unorthodox in the British halls of higher learning. Please don't become over-specialized. Be intellectually free. Try lots and lots of different things. I know you all have come here with very specific interests: law, art history, philosophy, and I'm sure you all prepared brilliantly to be the very best in your field at the ripe age of, 20? And that commitment is wonderful, but don't close your mind to other callings. My own son Charlie came up to Oxford to study modern history, thinking maybe he would be a journalist or an economist. 4 years later, he realized that his real love was medicine. So don't get me wrong, Charlie had a great time at Oxford. And today, reading the evaluations he receives from medical school, I noticed that one of the things his professors all mention is how literary and how well written all his research material is. So I don't for a second begrudge him the time he had here. I think how lucky he was. He came back from Oxford a very different young man from when he left. He really matured and found out what he wanted to do with his life. And that's obviously what's so amazing about university: discovering opportunities, meeting different people, and opening your eyes to all kinds of paths. And I also know, career-wise, how important it is not to be too highly specialized, especially these days in the world of media. It is crucial to have multiple interests and skill sets, to have tried and possibly failed at many different undertakings. The young people that we hire today at Condé Nast are fearless polymaths, hardworking and passionate, creative and curious. So part of my role as the artistic director of Condé Nast in the United States is to make sure that we embrace change and don't become too insular. So to that end, I've been inviting in leading figures and CEOs from all kinds of companies: Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, and to talk to the editors-in-chief and the digital creatives who run our websites. And a couple of months ago, we had a visit from Eric Schmidt, whom I'm sure you all know is the executive chairman of Google. And as I was giving him a tour of our new offices at the World Trade Center, he asked me if we still believed in the mini movie production Annie Leibovitz celebrity and fashion portfolios that Vanity Fair and Vogue specialize in. And I said, yes, we do, because I feel that's what separates the print magazines from what everyone else is doing. It makes us more special, more luxurious, and in a world that is moving so fast, I'm tempted to make them even more wonderful, something you cannot see anywhere else. But on the websites, there is zero interest in creating that kind of imagery. It doesn't make sense for the medium. Everyone who works on the digital side of Condé Nast is their own photographer, their own videographer, their own writer, their own editor. They're completely self-sufficient. That's a terribly important message today. I'm really impressed when I meet creative young people who also know how to code. Now, I can't possibly do that, but I think good for you. It's so important to understand the digital world in order to be part of it. In some ways, the digital realm of Condé Nast reminds me a lot of my days working in the 1970s at Harper's and Queen in London. Like today, back then you had to do everything. In my case, find the clothes, go on the shoots, write the captions, check the prices. You had to be self-sufficient. There were not departments. I remember when I first came to work at American Vogue, how shocked I was to see how separate every part of the magazine was and how little communication there was between them. The fabric editor had to make an appointment to see the shoe editor, and God forbid that the features department would actually talk to the fashion department. It felt like there were a lot of missed opportunities. In other ways, of course, it's a completely different world than the one I came up in. When I was 18, if you wanted to be a fashion editor and you had connections, you basically ran up the magazine and let them know you'd be coming in. A paycheck was really part of the deal. So working at a magazine in London came with the enormous advantage of tiny staffs and even tinier budgets, which put a premium on originality, independence, and risk-taking. This, I think, hasn't changed. England is still the best training ground for journalism and the arts. The smaller scale and the sense of freedom that allows are unparalleled. Thanks to my own English training, I arrived at New York in a New York Magazine in my early days in Manhattan, knowing how to do a little bit of everything. The men who ran the magazine weren't that familiar with fashion, and they were just so relieved when they realized that I could chat with the designers, talk to the advertisers, produce shoots, write, and edit. I was a one-woman show. My point being that when you understand the nuts and bolts of how something works, in my case, a magazine, in the case of all the young people I hire today, it's probably an iPhone 6, it makes you better at what you're doing rather than just being good at one thing. People who are very narrow in their focus are really frustrating. This is also a problem for many large, long-established companies. They tend to get very, very set in their ways. If you look at the mostly truly innovative companies that have come along in the last 10 years, few, if any, were incubated within existing corporate structures. They've all been startups. And I'll be the first to admit that at Condé Nast, we have been guilty of arrogance. We are Condé Nast. We are always done it this way. We're so busy on working at being the best, being perfect, that we haven't always been open to disruption or to seeing new things. So I hope that's changing, because it isn't good. One of the things I always look for, whether it's in a collection or a piece of writing or a photograph or a job candidate, is a point of view. My advice to you is to trust and to cultivate your taste. This is a real moment in our culture when your opinion matters. Everybody wants to know how you work, what you like, how you think. It's important to reach people of your generation today to know what the so-called millennials are up to, because there is, for the first time in decades, a true generation gap. A lot of people in positions of authority, decision makers, want to reach your generation because they understand how powerful it is that you're communicating through social networks in such a vital way. If you like something, tweet something, put it up on Instagram, that's an incredible tool. And it's one that influencers all over the world want to harness. You have a voice simply by the choices you make and the way that you live. So that said, you don't want to spend your entire life clicking and liking. I'm struck these days by how often people come up to me and ask to take a photograph, instead of shaking hands, meeting one's eyes, and actually having a conversation. Even at the shows today, people are so busy documenting with their iPads the moment, they forget to actually look at the clothes right in front of them. Social media is great, but don't let it become a substitute for living. I would also advise you strongly not to discount experience and training. This is something I tell young fashion designers nearly every day. They come to Vogue because straight out of school, they want help in starting their own labels. For very few, this is the right move. But in general, it is better to work with the best, to learn from the best, and to have the freedom to try various things, make mistakes, and perhaps to pivot, to use a word favored by Silicon Valley types. Christopher Bailey is, for me, a role model for how to have a fashion career today. He's both the CEO and creative director of Burberry, which is an unprecedented career achievement in fashion. He does everything, from design to branding to social strategy to budgets to finding the next music sensation to play at his show. To get to that place, and at such a young age, he worked for Donna Karan and Tom Ford, among others. He took a quiet but steady route to the top. And the other thing that I would add about Christopher is that he has never sought fame. To be famous these days with no grounding and no substance is not especially difficult. I urge you instead to seek to be relevant, agile, and educated. But you're all here at Oxford, so. So, what can I tell you about my time in America? Americans drink coffee instead of tea. They exercise at every possible opportunity. And their government has gotten far better than British tabloids at intercepting cell phone calls. But on a more serious note, I will say that America does open one's eyes to the enormous influence that one can have to do good things in the world. I find in life that the more you do, the more you can do. I myself have been particularly involved in the global fight against HIV, helping to bring the fashion industry together for many fundraising and awareness initiatives, or highlighting plays like The Normal Heart in Vogue. I always try to support the causes that are part of the world that I am lucky enough to work in, because that's what makes the most sense to me. So I also put a lot of effort to raise money on behalf of the Metropolitan Museum's Costa Institute and towards spearheading a now 12-year-old initiative that supports and mentors young designers in New York. I urge everyone here to remember how important it is at whatever stage you are in your life to get outside of yourself and your own ambitions and to think about how to help those who are less fortunate. It feeds back into what you do and comes out in your work. But I think you'll also find it deeply fulfilling in its own right. My nephew Luke knows this well. He plays tennis at a near professional level. He's a brilliant student, and he runs some kind of weird t-shirt business on eBay out of a garage with his friends. At the same time, he earns pocket money selling fruit at the market. He works in a soup kitchen, and he will soon be off to work in digital marketing in New York and then to help those in need in South America. So on the one hand, I look at Luke, who is so bright and so young, and I think, well, I don't know how he finds the time, but then I do. When you live with intention, you create the space to achieve true excellence in every sense. I am certain many of you already know this intuitively. That's why you're all here at Oxford. Next year, Luke will be joining you. And I look forward with enormous pleasure in seeing how Luke and all of you here tonight seize all the incredible opportunities that lie ahead of you. Thank you for having me.